Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. On behalf of Women's World Banking and UNCDF, welcome to today's Making Finance Work for Women webinar. My name is Karen Miller, Global Head of the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub. Before I dive into today's session, I wanted to share a few key points as we get started. First, please be aware that this event is being recorded. Second, you'll notice everyone's microphones are muted and cameras are off. This is intentional to keep the focus on our speakers today. Third, if you should experience any technical issues, please reach out to the email you see on your screen and we will do our best to assist you. Fourth, we'll be hosting a Q&A near the end of the webinar. To elevate questions to our speakers, please be sure to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. And finally, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our leading Making Finance Work for Women sponsor, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are also grateful for the ongoing support of our core funders for enabling our strategy: Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, and Visa Foundation. I'm particularly excited to be here today for the discussion, as it is also the launch of the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub, led by Women's World Banking and UNCDF. As the world continues to grapple with COVID-19, growing inequalities, and stagnant economies, we must ensure that women are not left behind. All of you on this call are taking actions to close the gender gap in digital financial inclusion. More than ever before, we need diverse partners aligning together to create lasting change. With a unified focus on advocacy, our collective action can create meaningful progress for women's digital financial inclusion, resulting in an environment where women can make an informed choice on their financial future, creating a world where women thrive and economies prosper. The Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub is the catalyst for collective action. And not only is today the official launch of the Advocacy Hub, but it is also the launch of the It's Her Economy Too campaign to focus on advocating for equal access to the technology, skills, and digital financial services for women, micro, and small entrepreneurs. There are two interconnected components to the Advocacy Hub: local coalitions in Indonesia and Ethiopia made up of civil society and public and private sector organizations who advocate for the priority women's digital financial inclusion issues in their markets, and the Global Advocacy Hub engine, which creates unified messages on priority issues at coordinated times in partnership with local, regional, and global partnerships. I want to thank our initial partners for joining the Advocacy Hub, including the Better Than Cash Alliance, CGAP, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, FinEquity, GSMA, IFC, Kaleidofin, and the World Bank Gender Group. But as I mentioned earlier, collective action requires all of us, and we'll share more later how to join. Today's discussion features leaders from the Hub and Ethiopia Coalition to discuss these core issues related to women's digital financial inclusion. We specifically wanted to launch at this time because just a few short weeks ago, the 2021 Global Findex report was released, giving us the most comprehensive view as to the state of financial inclusion. To start today's discussion, I'm so happy to have the founder of the Global Findex database, Leora Klapper, lead economist in the finance and private sector research team at the World Bank, to provide an overview of that gender lens of the Global Findex and set the stage to start the discussion. Leora, thanks so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, so thank you again for the invitation to join you. It's really a pleasure to present this morning. For over a decade, I've been saying that we were motivated to collect the Findex data because of our frustration. The data provided by banks to regulators on the number of accounts is typically a black box of data. That we didn't know how many women had an account as compared to men, or how many women paid for the groceries using a card or a phone or in cash. But now we do, because over the past 10 years, we've asked over 500,000 men and women about their use of formal and informal financial services. And the good news is that account ownership continues to grow. 76% of adults globally have an account, including 71% of adults in developing countries, more than 30 percentage point increase over the past decade. And the gender gap has narrowed for the first time since we started collecting the data in 2011. We find 74% of men have an account as compared to 68% of women. As compared to when we first started collecting the data in 2011, only 46% of men had an account compared to just 37% of women. The gender gap in account ownership across developing economies has fallen to 6 percentage points from 9 percentage points where it hovered for many years. In some countries like Turkey and Peru, growth in account ownership has been disproportionately larger for women, although large gender gaps remain. In some countries like Bangladesh, the growth in mobile money accounts is driving growth of accounts for women. This might be especially true among young adults. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, technology-enabled mobile money accounts are also helping drive access to finance for younger women. In the region, young men under the age of 35 are 8 percentage points more likely than young women to have a bank account. But there's no gender gap in mobile money account ownership. Among account owners in high-income economies, the use of digital payments is nearly universal for both men and women. In developing countries, 57% of adults make or receive a digital payment. However, among account owners, 83% of men with an account versus 76% of women with an account make or receive digital payments, a 7 percentage point gender gap, with exceptions. For example, women account owners are equally likely as men account owners to use digital payments in Indonesia and in Brazil, and in Pakistan, despite low overall account ownership and a 15 percentage point account ownership gap, 84% of men and women use their accounts for digital payments. So what's driving this? So part of what's driving the high and more equitable use of accounts is a growth in the use of accounts to receive payments. For example, 35% of men and 29% of women open their first account to receive a payment from the government or an employer. As shown in this kind of wild figure, 32% of women receive a payment into an account at a bank or a similar institution or a mobile money account. And these women are using their accounts. About half of women account holders receive a wage payment and 42% receive a government transfer. That's 5 percentage points higher than male account holders. Of these 32% of women receiving a payment, over 80% make a digital payment to pay bills or make purchases. Over 60% use their account for cash management. It's a safe place to keep money outside the home. And about 40% to save, and about 35% to borrow. Let's deep dive into one case study, the importance of mobile money accounts for women savers. We talked to women in Africa who are using all sorts of semi-formal and sometimes expensive savings mechanisms like susus to save $1 a day outside their home to meet their monthly expenses. Banks aren't necessarily designed for this type of high-frequency, low-denomination savings. But mobile agents might offer a convenient way to save, and we're seeing huge take-up across the region. A caveat of this figure is that many people report saving using both bank and mobile money accounts. So here the green bar is savings at a bank account only, whereas a dark blue bar are women who tell us they're using a mobile money account to save. We're finding about 15% of women across sub-Saharan Africa on average use their mobile money account to save, including over a quarter of all women in Kenya, Ghana, and Uganda, suggesting that although mobile money accounts might have been designed for person P2P payments, there's an appetite for them to deliver a wider range of financial services. And we again in 2021 asked the question, could you come up with emergency money in 30 days? It's about $3,200 in the US, about $330 US in India. But when piloting across Africa and Asia, we'd ask women, what would be your source of this money? And we often heard, I'd ask my sister. And so we followed up with the question, how difficult would it be to get the money? And we too often heard the response, oh, her husband would never let her send me the money. So we asked the follow-up question, how difficult would it be to come up with the money? And we find that women and poor people are more likely to depend on family and friends for emergency money, and more likely to find their social networks unreliable. Overall, we find that although social networks are trying to find extra work, are the most popular sources of emergency money in developing countries, they are not as reliable as savings. And finally, the Findex data measures opportunities to expand account ownership among the unbanked and usage among those who have an account. About 740 million women remain unbanked. A barrier to both unbanked men and women are the costs of opening and maintaining an account, and banking services being too far away, which are challenges where agent networks and mobile banking might help. But about 30% of unbanked women also say they use someone else's account, a higher percent than men. For example, in Turkey, 41% of unbanked women give this reason, compared to just 30% of unbanked men. And we know, and there's rigorous research to support, the importance of women having their own account on her family's spending and nutritious food, healthcare, education, as well as goods that may matter more to her, like the purchase of a washing machine. Another challenge is financial capability and the confidence to use financial services. For example, unbanked women are 10 percentage points more likely than men to say that they would need help using a bank or similar account. In Nigeria, unbanked women are twice as likely as unbanked men to say that they would need help. This also points to the importance of consumer protection regulations to protect new users of financial services who might be more vulnerable to financial abuse and fraud. But there's reason to be hopeful. Research I've done and others have shown the value of learning by doing. That the best way to build financial skills is by using financial services. Like we found evidence that women garment workers in Bangladesh who receive a wage payment into an account do more financial transactions on their own, are less likely to pay extra fees compared to workers with accounts who are paid in cash. In another paper, we find that low-income workers in Korea who send money home using a mobile app to family in developing Asia learn over time how to better use the fintech features to optimize their payments. This strand of literature points to the possibility that receiving payments into an account can help women become savvier financial customers. And there are many opportunities. For example, over 40 million unbanked women receive government payments in cash, and about 50 million unbanked women receive private sector wage payments in cash. In addition, about 65 million women receive cash payments for the sale of agricultural payments, and paying women farmers into accounts could be a stepping stone to a wider menu of financial services, including insurance, crop financing, etc. And so let me end by encouraging you to dig into the data and report yourself. We hope that the data will be useful to spotlight gender gaps in access, usage, and financial resilience. They're too large for policymakers and practitioners to ignore. So let me now introduce the panel moderator, Seth Gars, a tremendous thought partner of the Findex team and Senior Program Officer at the Financial Services for the Poor team at the Gates Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Klapper. That was a wonderful presentation, and I'm not sure how many folks caught that there was a lot of some new information there in particular that hasn't been shared before. So super exciting for us to be here for that. Great, really excited to be able to introduce a fabulous panel that's going to build off of some of those new data and talk about women, small and medium entrepreneurs. In particular, I just want to frame before I introduce our wonderful panelists today, kind of the focus of the conversation, right? So in particular, we're focused on how to kind of collectively and collaboratively support women, micro and small entrepreneurs. And so often when I speak with folks that are really motivated to reduce the gender gap, which fortunately we have some positive news from Leora about how that's been happening. People who are motivated to support women entrepreneurs, I hear, what should I do? Looking for tangible ideas. Well, fortunately on this panel, we have 3 individuals who have solid ideas and are actually pursuing those ideas to support women entrepreneurs. The challenge for a lot of people is that there's so many issues, right? There are issues of women that are constrained from certain segments of the economy. There are women that don't get paid for much of the labor that they perform. There are all kinds of issues involved in this topic. Today, we're going to focus on 3. We're going to focus on the role of technology, the role of skills, and the role of digital financial services in supporting women, micro and small entrepreneurs. So with that, I think we'll introduce our panelists, and I'm going to start with Nigest Haile, founder and executive director of CAWEE, which is the Center for Accelerating Women's Economic Empowerment, the pioneering trade promotion organization that she founded in 2004. Nigest is also founder and board member of the first women's commercial bank named Inat Bank. So I'll invite Nigest to join us on camera now. Also want to invite Natasha Jitanandani, co-founder and CTO of KaleidoFin, an India-based fintech platform that enables customers to achieve their personal finance and real-world goals. In her previous role, Natasha was VP of engineering at Bank Bazaar and has worked with Google and Microsoft as well. So please join us on camera as well, Natasha. Finally, but last but not least, of course, I'd like to invite Henriette Kolb, head of Gender and Economic Inclusion Group at the International Finance Corporation, which is a member of the World Bank Group, to join us on camera as well. Henriette's group is engaged in co-creating gender-smart private sector solutions, both through research, investment advice, and peer learning platforms. And before joining, Henriette was CEO of the Cherry Blair Foundation for Women. Great. So Henriette, maybe we can start with you and start with the technology topic, which is, again, is the first topic out of 3. So we've heard and we've seen from the GSMA's recent mobile gender gap report that there may in fact be a slowdown of progress in access to mobile phone internet and phone ownership for women in particular. And so when we talk about technology, Henriette, what are we talking about? What technology in particular for women entrepreneurs, and how do we ensure these entrepreneurs have access to this technology so they can best interact with their customers and marketplaces? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Seth, and congratulations, Leora and team, to what I think is one of the most powerful, insightful reports that really practitioners are absolutely thrilled to have in order to better tailor our products and services when we invest in the private sector or work with public sector clients. Now, Leora shared some great news, and Seth, kind of not to be Debbie Downer, but indeed sort of echoed like GSMA's report, which clearly showed that while 3.2 billion people access mobile internet, however, the gender gap on that side actually seems to have actually widened by just about a percentage point during the last year. And that might not come as an entire surprise, because we've seen that perhaps being correlated to women entrepreneurs during the pandemic, of course, losing significantly sales and having higher temporary business closures. So affordability could be quite likely one of the key obstacles to being able to further close this gap. But in some ways, if I travel back all the way to 2010, when actually I worked for the Cherry Blair Foundation and was partnering with GSMA on the very first mobile gender gap, not mobile internet gender gap, but just broader mobile gender gap, the reasons for lack of adoption, in particular for women, seem largely still the same. And that's the part to me that is slightly more depressing, and one which I hope we can rally around in the call for action. Namely, affordability remains a big issue. Literacy remains a big issue, and COVID has sort of, I think, decelerated a lot of the education gains, in particular for women and girls, where we've had made a lot of progress beforehand. And then, of course, digital skills, which we'll have a whole conversation around, are also one of the key obstacles for women to be able to adapt mobile internet. So those kind of reasons are still underlying some of the access part, if you wish, and the engagement on mobile internet. But then tying it back, and I think it's fabulous that Gates supports the launch of today's Advocacy Hub on digital financial inclusion, because one key barriers that we've seen consistently, and I'll give you 3 quick examples to further engaging women entrepreneurs on platforms, is digital financial inclusion. And it's a little funny to see, there is progress, but it's still one of the core barriers to it being even better for women entrepreneurs to enact on ride sharing, on e-commerce, on the latest that report we did was on online learning. So let me just give you a couple of examples. I've ceased investing, of course, in the private sector, and increasingly, as you can imagine, we invest in tech platforms. So all the way back in 2018, so quite a long time before the pandemic, we decided, look, as ride-sharing platforms and logistic platforms are just growing at the fastest speed in emerging markets as well as in developed markets, let's as investors be mindful to see who is on those platforms, who is engaging as users and as providers of these platforms. And what we found in that early report was that actually women entrepreneurs, when it came to ride sharing, used that opportunity to subsidize and kickstart their business. So 15% of all women drivers on the Uber platform, and we surveyed 11,000 drivers, were actually using that platform to kickstart. However, financing was one of the biggest obstacles alongside safety for more women to becoming drivers on the platform. So vehicle asset financing, of course, safety issues and concerns were some of the showstoppers. But if those were resolved, actually would see more women move into male-dominated sectors, but also accumulate higher incomes to then put back into their business. And so there is some direct sort of correlation and dependency there. The next one we looked at was Jumia and Lazada, and I see 179 fabulous people from all around the world, including a lot from Africa. So you probably have interacted on Jumia already. So we looked at how many women entrepreneurs are on Jumia's platform, to be staying in Africa for a minute. Good news is it was 50%. However, bad news was that women entrepreneurs were mainly represented in low value, high competitive sectors, and had a 7% decrease during COVID in terms of sales, while men had 7% increase of sales during COVID, because everyone obviously shopped increasingly online, but women entrepreneurs had struggled with the care responsibilities as well as being as engaged on platforms. So again, e-commerce can be a huge enabler for women entrepreneurs to accelerate growth of their business and break into male-dominated sectors. For example, we also found women are much more represented in electric goods, for example, which are not as much represented in offline economies. But if you don't put in the right enablers, women won't succeed. And one of these enablers Jumia thought they were putting on was platform financing. But when we dug a little bit deeper, what we found is that only 7% of women were accessing platform financing, vis-a-vis 12% of men. And that was despite women actually having higher success rates in applications than men. But most women were shy because they either didn't know that it existed, or they weren't able to kind of convince themselves to take the risk. So we have to do a little bit more digging, but the outcome was quite sort of a significant gap in terms of accessing the financing. And then last, perhaps to point out from an entrepreneurship angle on e-commerce, was that most women start on social commerce and have a harder time transgressing into e-commerce platforms. And that means that if you're on social platforms, you can't use and track the data to actually then apply for loans. So having a really clear path for women entrepreneurs from social to e-commerce is critical in order to be able to host and collect that data that could be valuable for loans. Last but not least, and I turn it back to you, the latest thing we looked at was as online education vastly accelerated and exacerbated gaps, gender gaps during the pandemic. We wanted to see what does that look like for post-secondary education. And so we worked with Coursera, which is one of the largest platforms, because they had comparable data. And we looked at 4 countries to better understand who is learning online. And what we found was quite a sizable gender gap. It was about 30% of learners were women and the rest were men. And in some markets that was even wider. But interestingly enough, what we also saw is that actually during the pandemic, more women came online to learn. But if they had better financing, they were able to take paid courses. Because again, there was a big gap between paid courses and unpaid courses between men and women. And the paid courses led to better job opportunities and led to higher entrepreneurial activity. So again, the financing piece was a key showstopper for women to be able to engage on equal footing with men on these online platforms. So in summary, I'd say, while we have good news to report, we need to tackle a whole underlying ecosystem of closing these digital financing gaps to be able to engage online in a much more equitable footprint. Seth, back to you.
Thank you so much. I just heard a bunch of examples where technology is really mediating experience in the labor market, which is super important from a variety of different segments, whether it's digital platforms, vocational opportunities, and others. You also mentioned financing, and I'm excited for Natasha in a few minutes to give us her perspective on the role of finance and how to facilitate that. But first, I want to turn to Nigest. Nigest, I understand that you're contributing from Ethiopia right now, and your organization is very involved with entrepreneurs who are kind of exporters. Would love to hear your perspective on, from your region on kind of how women in your region are accessing technology, what technologies, and accessing digital platforms, some of which Henriette just referred to, some of the challenges, but also success stories around access. So over to you, Nigest.
Thank you, Dr. Sitkars. I also thank the organizers in giving me such an opportunity joining this team. In Ethiopia, a large percentage of women access digital platforms through their mobile phones, others through laptops, and a few through tablets and iPads. Digital platforms through our existing commercial banks have started being operational. Currently, we have 27 commercial banks in Ethiopia, 2 giant public banks and 25 private banks. Every year, private banks are emerging. And currently, 3 private banks are using digital payment gateways. Mobile banking penetration is very low, estimated below 30%. Automatic teller machine is used in all our banks. Specific to Ennat Bank, which is my other hat, 11 of us visionary women were able to establish the bank. Ennat Bank was the 16th private bank, started being operational in 2013. Currently, we have 20,000 shareholders, 64% are women. The majority shareholders are us. Currently, Ennat Bank is operating with 104 branches. We also have strategic intervention to reach rural women through microfinance institutions. Ennat Bank's account holders, currently we have 266,327 account holders, 47% women. That shows 125,408 women account holders. In starting digital banking, mainly internet and mobile banking 2 years back, as of June 2021, we had 38,757 beneficiaries, 37% women. We have seen that beneficiaries prefer mobile banking than internet banking. Ennat Bank has opened an e-banking department a year back, starting to work on product development and continuing training its concerned ones at its branches. We also are having other digital platforms. Different private digital platform systems are emerging. We have Telebir, which is a government digital payment system. We have also private local initiatives coming up. Hello Cash, Arif Pay, Dube Pay, different kinds of payment systems are emerging. And currently we are having more Uber facilities coming up, where we have Ride, the first famous Uber, owned and managed by a very young women involved in IT. We have Saragella, where all drivers are women. We have other Uber facilities, Ferris and the others using digital platforms. This is an overview on how women, the facilities of digital platforms in Ethiopia. Our challenge related to, very much concerned with women, different factors contribute to the digital divide. But to mention the main ones, as my predecessor had been also mentioning, geographical restrictions, limitations on the freedom of movement of women is a serious challenge. Lack of motivation to use technology, we have seen it as a challenge. Financial independence, needed to purchase digital technology or pay for internet connectivity. It's expensive, so that also demands finance. Limited time because of women's multiple roles. And the digital illiteracy also is seen as a challenge. We have challenges also having in lack of mentors and lack of female role models, which can inspire others. The high cost of internet bundles, the packages are very expensive. High cost of internet-enabled devices, and poorly developed communication services. These are the main challenges which we also women also face. On success stories, we have few success stories to share. Despite those challenges, which I was trying to mention, we are having success stories. In our organization within CAWEE, we are in the process of launching an e-commerce platform where Ethiopia, Kenya, and Rwanda will be involved. Let me put it. Put the link in the chat. We are trying to use the. I couldn't get the chat. Okay. Yeah. This link will show you the coming soon of our e-commerce platform, where our theme focuses on boosting intra-African trade, African women taking the lead. We wanted CAWEE is spearheading this project, except we had a problem of starting to work on it on the payment system, where currently somehow we are trying to sort it out. We're going to sign an agreement with one of the banks, which I mentioned has a digital pay gateway, Abyssinia Bank, one of the 3 banks which I mentioned. The platform is expected to get launched in September 2022, in a few months' time. We wanted to launch this platform because currently in Africa, we are trading among ourselves only 16%. And using the current opportunity of our trade bill, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which nearly all our heads of states have signed and more than 40 have ratified, we wanted to use that opportunity that women take a lead role. And when women are going to be showcases. So this is one of the success stories we are having. The second one is we are having a project on virtual training, which is called Academy for Women Entrepreneurs AWE Virtual Training Program. This is an online training program that gives enterprising women the knowledge, networks, and access that they need to launch and scale successful businesses. It's operational in 8 African countries and about 10 in South American countries. So this was launched at our difficult time of during the pandemic, where having connections since the training was online. It was really difficult organizing and conducting this training. We had successfully got 244 women registered. Finally ended up 118 enrolled, but 63 were able to graduate. This was not an easy process because we need to women have to find time. And we need to agree the convenient time to all, because facilitators are going to do it from one pool, and the women at their residence, at their homes or in their preferred places have to join that. But we were not able to get convenient time that can bring all on board. So finally, what we had was women have to decide that they start to meet at 6 late in the evening, East Africa time. Wow. The kids bothering, disturbing, and the sessions were taking 2 hours continuously. So I mean, we were really congratulated that 63, which they were able to graduate. So
Nigest, I just want to interrupt for 1 second, because I think this example is really important, and I want to just make sure that our audience understands, kind of we frame it for our audience, and then we can return to it. What I first heard you say was, first of all, an incredible amount of innovative things coming out of Ethiopia, which I really appreciate you highlighting for us, including a new platform that you mentioned, a number of new kind of startups, not to mention the proliferation of financial services, and the model that you and your co-founders have of this women-led bank, which I think is a fascinating model that I could ask you hours of questions about. So that on one hand, and now we've started to kind of transition to, I think, what is really, and you also talked about some of the challenges for accessing technology, everything from connectivity issues, the cost of connectivity. And then you also spoke to something that I heard, which hopefully Women's World Banking and UNCDF through this new advocacy hub can address, which is elevating kind of examples of role models and leadership. But then transitioning to the second topic of skilling, going beyond technology as our first topic and into skilling as the second, you started to talk about ways and challenges in increasing the capacity of women entrepreneurs. And I think that's what you were talking about now. And what you started talking about the challenges, which I think is great. And would also love to hear how you think about, the challenges there and also scaling that opportunity. So please, if you could share more about that, that'd be super useful for us as we think about the skilling theme.
what I was trying to speak was following the challenges on our success stories. So that was why I started on our e-commerce platform.
Absolutely.
Then the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs, virtual training, which we had been very successful, but still having challenges that women were not able to find time to find having connectivity problem and all those. But despite all those challenges, they were able to graduate and were able to be part of the business plan competition, and then 4 of them were able to get awarded by US African Development Foundation. So for us, these are success stories. I don't know if I'm responding your question, or I have about 2 or 3 activities which are now on the pipeline, which I can share.
Wonderful. Yeah, please do. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. During the pandemic, as you all know, physical meetings were impossible. Travels and taking international trade fairs were not possible. So what we experienced was taking part at virtual trade fairs, which we have never had before, but very cheap. And we were able to manage, and our women were able to find buyers. So business-to-business meetings, webinars. So this really has changed the view of many of women to use digital platforms and do business in much cheaper way. And currently, there are different initiatives. All of what I'm discussing was what CAWEE has been doing, but again, in a country level, different initiatives are taking part, which we are very glad. New initiative from Global System of Mobile Application, GSMA, to empower women through GSMA Innovation Fund is taking part this time, where 1,000 SMEs are expected to get involved, and glad we are 700 of them are women. And this initiative funds organizations that comes with innovative digital solutions, and it provides technical support, trainings, supporting them in digital tools like developing their websites, visibility of Google, My Business, social media engagements, digital marketing for visibility of the SMEs. This is one intervention. The other one we are having now, which most of our women are benefiting, is the Digital Launchpad project sponsored by NORAD, which is implemented by Africa 118, and where CAWEE is also a partner. This intervention has 500 targets, 500 SMEs, and 250 are women. And quite a good number of women are benefiting from this program. The last one is Google Digital Skills for Africa, which is sponsored by Google to bridge the digital literacy divide, a project implemented by Africa 118, which we are also involved in providing a number of SMEs to this program, targeting 5,000 SMEs, and 1,000 women SMEs are women. They are having a difficult time of getting interested women to take part in this project. So this project works more on awareness creation on digital skills, capacity building, including trainings in different areas. So in a nutshell, this is what is happening in Ethiopia, both through CAWEE and also through different partners for women in having digital access in digital platforms.
And I guess that was a wonderful list of examples. So much of what you mentioned really, I think, talked about technology as a mediator for kind of achieving reach and scale of some of the interventions to reach women. You also highlighted something that, you know, sometimes it's difficult to get folks, women entrepreneurs to show up for very practical reasons, timing issues, the burden of having to care for other folks in the household. And so these, what seem almost sometimes like mundane design issues in terms of what time of day to organize your event, end up being profoundly important for engaging entrepreneurs. And I think it's something that we should think more seriously about. And it sounds like you have a bunch of models and insights for us, which you've shared. Transitioning now to Natasha on that theme of technology as a mediator. You know, Natasha, you're engaged in kind of a technology company and building services that are useful for businesses and women. Can you share, you know, how you think about skilling and capacity issues as you build, you know, these digital and financial oriented services and products? And how do your products really reflect variation in the skills of your consumers in the Indian market in particular?
Sure. Thanks, Seth, and thank you for having me on this panel. Very insightful, inputs from the other panelists, as well as from the Findex report, which we've really enjoyed going through. I think, in a nutshell, very quickly, Kaleidofin is what we're trying to build here is a fintech platform that really tries to make informal sector customers be able to access financial services, but really with the lens of making their real life goals a reality. We really believe that financial services should be offered based on what a customer needs, instead of, with a lens of what a financial provider provides. And especially in, for women, as well as this, we work at an intersection of women and informal sector. So there's really a need to simplify and bring these solutions in an intuitive way. We strongly believe that just leveraging technology, data science, as well as building, better designed financial products can be really transformational for women entrepreneurs. That's really sort of the lens with which we look at things. So towards that, the ways in which we've tried to build in our product offering, also with the sense of how do we scale it up over time, to your question, we really look at how do we make these products intuitive and yet very personalized. And so we apply a lot of, we look at data a lot, past history of customers when they have taken loans, especially because a lot of savings tends to be actually a new product very often in the market that we work in. We apply a lot of AI and ML, but in the background, in the back end, to really determine what is the persona of a customer, what is their financial resilience, and then allow the technology, therefore, to recommend the right kind of solution to the customer. I think another thing we do very, very often is to design our solutions to be holistic to what the customer needs at that time. So for example, women entrepreneurs, need the ability to borrow at times, and they also believe in savings at other times in their journey. And I think, a holistic offering that allows them to access both, which, is really recommended to them basis what their goals are. And goals can be very different, right? If I want to expand a particular small business, I may need a goal which allows me to save up to a certain level at a certain point, versus a different goal. If I could be a women entrepreneur, but I can have life goals also around my family, or needing to work towards supporting various people in my life. So depending on that, the design of the financial solution is broader. We recommend savings as well as meet emergency credit requirements, as well as normal credit requirements, as well as bundle in insurance at appropriate points, so that the woman entrepreneur doesn't have to necessarily, think about each of these components separately. And I think that's one of the challenges in the world today, is it really, there's a lot of effort required in choosing each of these, and we try to simplify that. Another way in which we really believe in simplifying the product offering is to bring it to women in their local language. We have experimented a lot with voice-based engagement with customers, and that has had great success. And we continue to build that up. We really look at also another important aspect is, and a big learning we've had in really building the ability of women to adopt our products, is to combine tech with touch. Where we first very often introduce our products to the women with assistance, very often from a trusted source within the community. Very often we partner with microfinance institutions or other institutions who they have been working with in the past. And you may have, I mean, I think this was also highlighted earlier in the Findex report highlights, where women are actually, 7% points more likely than men to need help. And I think unbanked women, I think that percentage points is even higher. I think it was 10 per what Leora highlighted earlier. I think that combined with also a gender gap in phone ownership, which Henriette talked to very clearly, it really means that women have a need for assistance very often to adopt products early on, and our approach is very often in how do we provide an assisted model to start with, but how do we also slowly nudge the entrepreneur, the customer, into adopting, say, an app over time, engage her via voice-based experiences or via WhatsApp, various channels to slowly nudge them into being able to control this account, work with us directly, be able to access broader financial services as the need arises. I think one more point I would mention, just in terms of importance, both in terms of scaling up the capacity of women and allowing them to grow both financially as well as digitally, is just trust. There's a lot of difficulty, right? When you're first adopting your first product, you've not really seen this before. For many women, this is the first time they're stepping into this world. And so we really, need strong consumer protection frameworks, standardization in how the customer is informed about the risks. We believe, again, how do we bring this information to people in their vernacular languages? We very often believe in standardized, simplified fact sheets, which allow the person to really take away the core of the product, build trust, again, through local experts and people they trust already via that tech and touch approach. And I feel like this combination of using strong technology to recommend the right thing and yet simplified experiences digitally, as well as assisted experiences transitioning into digital experiences, has really worked for us. So I hope that answered your question, but that's been
absolutely. Natasha, I heard so many important things there. I mean, I heard the importance of local language. I heard tech plus touch, in particular how trust then mediates one's willingness and ability to interact with the financial system, and how that translates into the need for consumer protection. It's unusual to speak to a financial service provider and or those that work with them and say, we need more consumer protection, but counterintuitively, that's fascinating, right? We think of consumer protection as maybe constraining financial organizations, but in fact, by creating trust, you actually expand the market and expand access to folks like women. And I think that's a really a point that's often overlooked and super important. And thank you for sharing that. I also really love how you framed providing financial services in the context of real world needs. It's not so often, I think this financial inclusion community, of which we are a participant, is focused on finance for finance sake, as opposed to finance for addressing the real needs of consumers, and in this case, women entrepreneurs. So thank you for framing that. Maybe in just 60 seconds before we go to our call for action, you're doing so much innovation. You're in the belly of the beast, so to speak, kind of like actually making products and actually serving real customers. Why aren't other financial institutions doing this? Is there a cultural difference? Do you have any intuition without calling it out individuals by name?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think the market is so large. The opportunity is so large. I think there are challenges. I mean, I think, it is much easier to build products when core basics like smartphone ownership or bank account access is already in place. And it's so heartening actually to see the Findex report, to see the movement on some of these in a positive direction. I know we have a long way to go, but my hope is that more and more people will serve this segment because I think the opportunity is huge. And the more we play in the space, the more the challenges will get addressed, like there will be more investments from, a public sector side of things. And so I think it's, the more financial providers here, the better.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I mean, we have two examples of female leaders who are creating businesses off of this opportunity, Natasha and also Nigest, with the bank that you co-founded in Ethiopia. So in that context, what I'd like to do in the last, let's say, 8-9 minutes is this call for action. So we have, I think, a couple hundred folks online who are listening now. It's a unique opportunity to be very clear about what recommendations we would have in terms of how to engage and collaborate. And Henriette, I know you have to leave in a bit, but I want to turn to you and offer you the first word in terms of call for action from your perspective.
Well, first one is probably logic, which is join the Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub if you're an institution. But I think it would be wonderful to expand that community of learning. The second is, I think, fantastic examples of Natasha and Nigest. So if you're working in those regions, I think invest in both, because the solutions and products seem really very thoughtful and built around the needs and from the ground up. Sort of more on IFC's experience, when we think of coming together a community to support women entrepreneurs, we think of 6 C's. And I just quickly mention them. So one is obviously capital. Second one is capacity. Third one is community. Fourth one is contracts. Fifth one is connectivity. And then the last one, which is a shared one, we could say 7 C's, is confidence and care. So wherever you might be placed in the ecosystem, you might want to tackle 1 or 2 of them. Just to give you a quick flavor, and I really like what Natasha said about diversifying financial products. On the capital side, I think for the longest time, we as an investor looked at SME credits, and that's important. We still have a 1.5 trillion credit gap for women entrepreneurs. So there's work to be done. But credit alone is not going to, resolve the issue around growth of women entrepreneurs. And so looking at savings, obviously, but then more sophisticated products such as insurance, which even require more trust to be built. It's such a difficult concept to sell, but it can be done. We've seen that during the pandemic in particular, peace of mind is so critical for women, not assuming women have, risk aware, averseness, but really are much more risk aware, and mitigating for that is really critical. And then certainly looking at housing finance, because we know most women entrepreneurs run their businesses informally, oftentimes out of their home. And so looking at access to housing finance is another one. So as investors, think of a whole suite of financial products and really tailor them to the ecosystem that you're in. The other part that we really pay a lot of attention to is,
Henriette, so I just, sorry to cut you off. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to give their call for action, but I heard you say grounding in real world needs, which is kind of echoing what Natasha said, and the relationship between the household needs, so the house, and also the business needs, as there's obviously integration between those two. Nigest, I don't know if you can, so I'd also love to hear if you have 2 minutes, kind of your call for action and what you would recommend for our listeners.
I suggest need for more awareness, the creation on digital financial platforms, the uses, the benefits for individuals as well as for the country, and need for availing more trainings for women, if possible, free of charge or at a low cost. And we need also to encourage women to take part at digital financial trade fairs. These things are happening now in most of the time. Even in Ethiopia, we are having digital trade fairs, financial trade fairs. So it's good also that women get the exposure of the technology and all that. So we need to encourage women to take part at digital financial trade fairs. And we need to continue engaging ourselves in advocacy and campaigning, particularly in my country, because we have lots of problems in that area, creating awareness on the benefits of women's digital financial inclusion, for women's concerns and voices also to be heard. Creating platforms for women themselves so that they air out their problems themselves instead of us talking on their behalf, but giving them a chance what kind of digital platform that really suits them. So we need to give them opportunities, and we need to learn from experiences of other countries so that we don't reinvent any wheel. So we learn from best practices of women in digital financial inclusion in other countries. Let's learn from them, scale it up, and we try to recommend opinions to our policymakers and legislators. I think that's what I can contribute.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So much in there. Natasha, give you like last 2 minutes to make your kind of call for action here.
Sure. I think one that there are so many, but one that's close to my heart is, so for example, something that the Findex report brings out very well is that account ownership has really increased and is moving in a great positive direction, which I think is very, very heartening. I think what also I think I think activity on these accounts though also is an important aspect. And I think for women especially, I think this is a tough challenge, especially in India, especially when access to accounts can require distances. There are challenges around geography. And so I think whatever we could do to invest in being able to make these accounts more and more active, for example, closer access to cash in, cash out points. And there's been fantastic investments in India towards this. There's over 1 million cash in, cash out points, but it's a large country. And so I think further investments on that front could be very interesting. Investments in better accounts, just pushing on that front for women in this sector. For example, lower charges, no bounce charges, so that there isn't a fear in terms of usage of the account. Because I think we have noticed this where there's a hesitation that women have in actually using something because they've been slapped with fees in the past. And so just advocacy around that, and being able to create those kind of very affordable accounts that still work for all the providers could be very interesting, because I think it will improve trust, it will improve adoption of also digitally using these accounts, because it starts from that piece. Yeah. So
kind of basic accounts, making sure trust and consumer protection is there. So many rich ideas that hopefully our audience can make real. So I'm just going to echo Henriette's suggestion that everyone sign up for the Advocacy Hub. I also, Henriette, will note that before I intervened, you're about to add what you added in the chat, which is we could also diversify procurement, which I think is what you meant by contracts. So when we're procuring services for governments or for companies, making sure that there are women leaders and women-led companies who participate in that process, I think is a great idea. So for those of you, we're about to hand it over to Q&A. Our colleague from Women's World Banking, Leila, is going to lead that. But for those of you who may slip off, I just want to say that, if for those that wanted to show up for some generic comments about, women entrepreneurs, I think you would be disappointed, because we heard some very substantive examples, very substantive recommendations, many of which I think are very actionable. So I'm really excited and appreciate that contribution. Henriette, thanks for joining. We know you have to leave. And very much look forward to following up with you on some of the great work that IFC has done on platforms in particular. So over to you, Leila. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Seth, and thank you to all our panelists for such a wonderful discussion. We have some great questions during the Q&A, and I'm going to answer them live, and I will let you know who the question is for. So the first question that I have here is, what significant change would you like to see in the next 2 years in tech, skills, and digital financial services? I believe this question should be for all the panelists, so please feel free to answer that. What significant change would you like to see in the next 2 years in tech, skills, and digital financial services? So over to you, panelists.
Maybe I can take a stab first. So I think, I think a lot of interesting changes are happening already on the tech front. I know in India, there have been a lot of good investments around, enabling an identity system that has allowed easy verification, strong digital payment networks, that have, really enabled things. We're going live with, with adoption across banks of account aggregator, which allows, citizens to give consent to share their data to get access to credit. I think these are fantastic investments. I think we should just really continue to invest in this front from, the perspective of just, public sector, overall public goods, technology, so that many of us as, either financial providers or fintechs can grow and build on that. So I would say continued investments on that front. I do think certain things, like maybe a repeat of what I called out earlier, but investments in making some of these accounts as well as cash in, cash out points easier to access would be very useful. And also just investments, I would say, on more language support, more local language support, where there are more machine learning related investments and being able to do voice-based support in automated ways. From India, we've got so many languages, and it's not even just about the languages. There's so many dialects within languages, and so the more we can have core tech investments around that, the more I know we can evolve on those fronts. And so those are also additional technology investments, at least, that I think could be really interesting.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natasha. We have a very interesting question here, and Leora, wondering if you can answer this. Someone is asking, what was the most surprising statistic that came out of the Findex in your perspective?
Good question. There are a lot of statistics in the Findex. So one number, for example, we added a new question of just mobile money users in Africa. Can you use your mobile money account without help? And I was surprised how high the number. So it was a third of mobile money account holders, 33% of women, 28% of men say they can't use their account without help from a family member or an agent. And this really suggests that many users are more vulnerable to financial abuse and fraud. And really, to pick up on Natasha's comment, the possibilities and potential to use leverage technology, included automated ways to provide more complete and accurate information to especially mobile money consumers.
Thank you very much, Leora, for that. We really appreciate your feedback, given the fact that you were involved so heavily in the Findex report. So thank you. We have a question here for the guest. Someone is saying, very happy to hear about Enad Bank and digital and supporting exporter women. To what extent is your services reaching poor women, and how can women access the platform that you had alluded to earlier? How can they trade on the platform that you had alluded to earlier? Thank you.
Thank you, Leil. Maybe from your previous question, a little bit of contribution. I want to see changes in the coming 2 years, particularly awareness created and actions are taken both by the government, creating a leveling ground, a conducive environment in issuing policies, proclamations, regulations, in creating conducive business environment for digital financial inclusion for women. And also the private sector taking a lead role in coming out with women-friendly financial products, so that women can really benefit from those digital financial platforms. For us, my center's CAWEE is involved in supporting women in export only. That category is existing potential and emerging women exporters that are involved in small and medium enterprise. But from my other hat of Enad Bank, as we are currently having only 104 branches, very limited because of we're so young. We just started being operational in 2013. So, and lots of private banks emerging. The strategy we used to reach rural community is contracting our services to microfinance institutions. So currently we have 3 microfinance institutions where they manage our funding. and those are reaching quite a good number of rural women to get served. So we're trying to continue opening more branches, reaching rural areas, even though opening a branch is not an easy issue because it demands lots of costs. But again, we're trying to open more branches, but again, using more financial institutions also to reach rural women so that they get served.
Thank you very much, Nigest, for that answer. So we have time for one more question, and this question is for you, Natasha. So how prominent are cultural sensitivities that discourage women from opening accounts in India and accessing broader financial services? And also, the gender gap in access to and use of digital financial services often reflects societal constraints, as we know, resulting from domestic laws and regulations that exclude women from financial services. What can be done about that in India specifically? And that question is from Raul Gomez Velasquez. And that unfortunately will be the last question for today. Thank you.
Sure, I'll try to do justice to that question. So I think, there are definitely challenges that women face, right, when trying to adopt financial services. But I do think that there's been a lot that's been done, especially with the advent of microfinance, which has now been around for several decades, which has really empowered, I think, women at a very grassroots level to be able to access group lending. And it's created, I think, a culture where it has empowered women at a very core level to be able to go out there and build businesses or access credit when needed for various purposes. So I feel like to some extent in India, I think that groundwork has really helped. And I think that's something that's been across South Asia and has expanded now across the world. So I would say there are still, I don't disagree. There are definitely challenges at a societal level that affect Indian women. And but we find that among many of the women we meet on the field, they are finding ways to meet those challenges. They are participating more and more in bringing proper access to the necessary financial offerings that their family needs appropriately. So I would say, we are moving in the right direction. 95% plus of our customers are women. So, I think, definitely we feel that there are ways in which they're solving this. Of course, again, access to digital payments is very tough because there's a huge gender gap in, for example, phone ownership, and especially in smartphone ownership. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of really narrowing that gap, making this accessible for women. We also have definitely.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for that.
And that really takes us full circle, Natasha. Thank you for that. That was an eloquent transition, because we started with the conversation over technology, right? And then we talked about skilling, and then we talked about digital finance. And so with that and some of those great calls for action, and thank you for the contributions, for the questions from the audience. I want to thank you all. Nigest, thank you very much for the inspirational stories from your region and the various organizations you founded. A lot for us to consider and take action on. Natasha, incredible innovation coming from your organization, really great insights about the role of both tech and touch, and also the importance of consumer protection and local languages. And then Leora, of course, thanks so much for the unique data sources from Findex and the incredible work in getting this latest round of invaluable data out to the world. So thank you all. I'm going to now invite folks to turn off their cameras and transition to Karen, who's going to take us to the end here with the last word. Karen Miller is the Vice President and Team Leader for the Women's Digital and Financial Inclusion Team at Women's World Banking, co-host of this event. Over to you, Karen, for the last word.
Thank you so much, and Seth, for moderating this wonderful discussion, and Natasha, Nigist, Henriette, and Leora for your incredibly insightful comments and calls to action. A couple of things that I was reflecting on that I heard today, the power of local advocacy campaigns that Nigist mentioned, learning from other markets. One of Henriette's C's stuck with me in terms of the community. And so I think all of that really boils up to the fact that we need to be doing more for collective action. And the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub is designed for that. As Henriette and Seth mentioned, we want you to be joining us in this effort. We want the diverse stakeholders, including civil society members, private and public sector, research organizations, multilaterals, all to join the Advocacy Hub and local coalitions to use our collective voice to drive action. As a Hub partner, you contribute your valued expertise in women's digital financial inclusion to our work. And the Hub really serves as that engine to design the advocacy campaigns, leveraging the materials in your expertise, highlighting your relevant work, creating those speaking opportunities so we can influence key stakeholders for the Hub partners, overall media relations so that we keep that steady drumbeat and pressure on those that need to drive large-scale change in the press and more. So we really want to be focused on creating that unified drumbeat of advocacy messages to ensure that we really make it her economy too. And so for more information, you can go to itshereconomy2.org. Make sure to follow the hashtag itshereconomy2 on your social channels. We'll be introducing the Advocacy Hub over the next several weeks, and we'll be coming together, hopefully with more of you, more partners in September when the UN General Assembly meets. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to our panelists. And we look forward to engaging with all of you in future Advocacy Hub activities. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are around the world. And once again, thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.